right, let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to WWULive. Should my organization build an app or website? I'm Meredith Esquivel, Digital Marketing Whaler and Dean of our quote-unquote Whale University. On today's webinar, we'll cover when to build an app versus a website based on your goals and budget, how to choose tech tools that will meet your needs, tips for planning for a new app or website or for a site redesign, and best practices for writing a request for proposal. Before I pass the mic to our awesome speakers, just a few admin notes. We will be recording the webinar and we'll share the recording, the deck, and additional resources over email after today, so keep an eye on your inbox. And please leave questions in the chat on the right, as we'll have time for a Q&A at the end. So with that, I will pass the mic over to Anne and Morgan.
All right, thanks Meredith, and thank you everyone for joining us. It is a beautiful day to be in a webinar here in New York, and I'm very excited to be presenting today with Morgan from Milkrate to answer this question of our time: should we build a website or an app? And we've got a good group here, and we can keep this an open conversation, and we will acknowledge that we'll provide you with frameworks to help guide your answer to that's unique to each of your organizations with their approach to building a website or an app. And ultimately, it doesn't have to be an or, you can have both. But at any given moment, we'll walk you through a framework to help you figure out what is best for now and what is best for scaling in the future. So we'll spend a couple of minutes on giving you an intro on who we are and then diving straight into answering those questions. I am Anne. I'm with Whale Lead, the New York office. We are a digital agency that helps nonprofits leverage web data and tech to increase their nonprofit impact. And I have been at Whale for about 5 years now, and I've had the privilege of working with a decent number of nonprofits building websites, products, and systems. And if you've seen any of our past presentations, you know that we love A/B testing, and I will run a dollar bet battle any day. And I especially love the work that we do because we get to work with amazing organizations, some of whose logos you can see here. And Morgan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan Berman. I'm the CEO and founder of Milkrate. And I'm really excited to be here. It's our second webinar with Whale, and I'm really looking forward to getting into the programming with you. All right. And yeah, this is the Milkrate slide. So this is just basically telling you a little bit about us. We are a B Corp certified tech company, and we help nonprofit and municipal programs achieve their missions by making it easier to engage participants and measure that engagement with our award-winning mobile solution. And basically what we are is a platform that allows nonprofit programs to affordably launch their own app on our platform. And it's a way to pick from ready-to-go features that are specifically designed for nonprofit programs and nobody else, really. It's tailored to their needs so that they can have an admin dashboard to manage users and content and generate activity reports so you can have real insight into how effective is that program? How many kids did you get to go to the museum, or how many adults did you get to vote, and get that insight into your program's success.
Great, and as we go along in the presentation today, please feel free to tweet at us and leave comments in the Q&A section of our chat. And you can visit our respective sites. Milkrate, with an awesome name, is at milkrate.tech. And here are some of their amazing clients. All right, and before we get into answering the question, ultimately apps or websites or SMS or email or social media are ultimately channels and medium to help you get where you are going. So we always want to start with the goals of your organization. What are you looking to achieve so that you can choose the right mode of transportation? Ultimately, when you are looking at, for example, directions on going to different places, let's say to Central Park, the destination can be seen as the goal of your organization. That is where ultimately you are looking to drive to. And then from there, you can look at different modes of transportation, car, planes, but sometimes there's jet ski, foot, to figure out what is the best mode of transportation for you and for your organization to get to your goal. And in this case, the mode of transportation, when we're talking about digital assets and digital presence, are things like apps, sites, social media, things that we will be covering, mostly app and sites today. There is a great quote from this amazing book, A Leap of Reason, where we're lost, but at least we're making great time. So what if you're getting a lot of tweets and shares on Facebook and Twitter, and also a lot of traffic on your site? Are people on your website and those different channels engaging in a way that matters the most to your organization? And this is our way of saying, if you have an app and you have a website, but do you know what the goal of having these different medium are to your organization? And so we always want to anchor it back to your goal. Why do you have a digital presence? And the reasons can vary among different organizations. Some could be sharing donations, some could be getting long-term engagement for volunteering, to illustrate impact and share thought leadership with your supporters. And we have as you've seen, this funnel of engagement in many ways before, whether it be a ladder of engagement or curve of commitment, where up top we have the awareness level where people know about you. And ultimately, we want to move people who know about you down to supporters who are interested and engaged and committed over time with your organization. And so what channels, what medium can we employ to get to that goal? For example, when we're looking at one of our clients, WWULive America, which is the largest organ registry in the country, their goal simply is to increase the percentage of Americans who are registered as organ donors. So the key action that WWULive America is working hard at moving the needle is the number of people who are registered to be a donor. And the frequency of this action, because I only have a certain set of organs, it only makes sense for me to register one, and that will be done. So the frequency here is very low. In this case, it doesn't make sense for WWULive to be investing in an app, but a website is perfectly fine to help WWULive achieve the goal that they're set out. So a mobile-first site gets the job done perfectly fine. So going back to having clear goals as to why your organization exists, no matter whether you go with a website, a native app, or a web app, it is critical to be able to measure the metrics that matter the most to your organization, whether that be through Google Analytics or through Firebase for app measurement. And the key to successfully measuring these metrics is to identify metrics that are smart. We like smart because it's specific. Whether you want to know how many people volunteered, so that's measurable, and you want to make it actionable. Is there something in the data that tells us to increase a certain marketing effort, for instance? It has to be incredibly relevant to your team and time bound. So we need to look at week over week, month over month, or a quarter, because any time range beyond that, for example, 3 years, will no longer be relevant data that is actionable. And just to make this a bit more complicated, we like to make smart VU. So finally, these metrics need to be valid and understandable. Valid as in clearly defined, so that your entire teams understand when you talk about downloads or volunteers, what does that actually mean when it comes to web measurement or app measurement? And it has to be understandable and translatable into sentences that anyone can look at and understand. And one framework that we really like is from Nir Eyal. There's this book called Hook that he wrote a while ago on how to build habit-forming products here, and I put that in quotes. Products can be inclusive of both websites and apps. Ultimately, these habit-forming products need to have a trigger, whether it be notifications or emails that gets your audience and your supporters to take an action that then results in some kind of reward, whether it be satisfaction and knowing that you've done something good to volunteer. That gets them to invest more of their time. And then this is a infinite loop where if you are able to build this habit loop, whether it be a website or an app, this is the most valuable long-term engagement that you can build among your audience. And going on that end, let's go back to apps. Morgan, when are apps valuable?
Okay, so the goal is to, when we work with clients, and what we focus on is the goal is about better engagement for program participants and then tracking that data for your stakeholders. The value specifically to the users of the app or those program participants is making it easier for them to complete activities, consume content, and have one and even two-way communication streams. Gamification and being able to see visual progress are also kind of secondary benefits. And then the value to the staff at the organization is having a tool for program management, making it easier for them to do their jobs, to engage those participants, And then the value to the funders is that transparent success data, seeing how many people did you get to do the thing that you're funding that organization to do.
Great, and this ties perfectly into the hook model. And with that, Morgan, now that you're back, I'll bring screen share over to you so you can move through your slides.
Great, okay. Okay, and all right, everyone. So sorry about that. I don't know what happened with Zoom, but here we are. So we're going to talk through guidance for considering app development when you're particularly from the nonprofit program perspective. So this section is going to focus on a little bit of history about mobile apps for nonprofits and our work there, the problem around engagement and the tools that are needed, some case studies, and kind of a walkthrough around who needs an app versus who needs a Milk Crate app and who doesn't, which is just as important. So this is the history lesson. So over the last decade or so, there was kind of a rush to build apps for nonprofits, which in many cases left a lot of nonprofits thinking that apps are a terrible choice. And in a lot of cases, they were not the right tool for the problem that was trying to be solved. Or sometimes there wasn't even a problem identified. It was just well, they have an app, so I want one. And so it's really important, like we've been saying and Anne was talking about, to set real goals and to use the right tools to achieve them. And so that's why Milk Crate's really taken a focused approach to only building one specific kind of app for one specific client with one specific problem. We are not trying to solve all problems with one tool. That rarely works. So that's just kind of some good historical context about how we're approaching things, and for all of you who maybe have heard or seen research pro and against different tools for different problems. So the specific thing that we're going to focus on today when we talk about mobile apps is when nonprofit programs are trying to be successful, there are still the three that unaddressed barriers to successful programs that we focus on are participation, participant communication, content distribution, and measuring activity performance. When you can get those three things, you're going to be much closer to reaching your mission, but right now there's a real gap. And so that's what we work on. And the tools that nonprofits have relied on in the past have been things like social media, but as you all know, that's something that you have to pay to reach your audience, and it can be very expensive and kind of shouting into the void. And it's not going to be a contained environment where you control your data and your audience. And again, very expensive to try and reach everyone with every single announcement. Another kind of tool that has been relied on with mixed results is newsletters. Now, these are things that, we all get every day, and most of us don't open most of them. And often that's because there's just a glut of information, and it's kind of just asking us to do too much at once and not in a thoughtful way. Now, what we have seen is that mobile phones are an increasingly accessible way to reach all kinds of people, and it is in fact the most equitable way from a age, race, and gender and income perspective to try and reach people. And so that's part of why we're really focused on reaching people where they are, which is on their phones. These are three case studies that I'm going to take a deeper dive into in a second. These are three examples of apps that we've built specifically for programs within existing nonprofits. These are existing programs that already had a lot of the things they needed, but the app took it many steps further for them. The first one on the left, the Reading Captain by Read by Fourth, makes it easier for volunteers to access information, communicate with each other, and report on program efficacy for a grant renewal program. The middle one is tracking teen program participants visiting museums to show the funders the engagement through qualitative and quantitative data. And then the third is encouraging employees to be civically engaged with current content and opportunities to participate pre-election. So the first one, the Committee of 70, this client had a program called We Vote, and they wanted to make it easier for the participants to receive content and to be able to track their participation so they can start to measure, are they helping move the needle around civic engagement in Philadelphia? And so the executive director, David Thornburg, talked about how this is a tool that we hope to build and reinforce this culture of voting and civic engagement in Philadelphia. And in that chart at the top, you can actually see their growth once they launched their app. They launched it at the end of September, and they were able to start getting users and having them start participating in these things leading up to the primaries. So they were very excited to have that tool for the first time. This is another case study, the Cultural Alliance. They are a program that makes it free for teens to go to museums in and around the city. And so they were able to, for the first time, make it easy for teens to just check into the museum on their phone and to actually see that data. And this is a little infographic about that program in the first 6 months of the program. They're now over 3,000 teens, but in the first 6 months, they had 2,000 teens using the app, checking into museums, and they were able to see which museums they were going to. The kids were writing comments and testimonials about their experiences. So they're able to get that quantitative and qualitative data they needed about program participation. And then finally, the Read by Fourth program. This is a cross-organizational initiative with the library and 100 other organizations to get all kids on grade reading level. And it calls upon hundreds of volunteers across the city to promote literacy in their neighborhoods. And so this app is for those reading captains, those volunteers, to have that information at their fingertips. And so that the Read by Fourth staff can track the volunteers and the efforts that they're making, so they can track the impact they're having and report that back to their funders as part of the program evaluation grant requirement. So those are just 3 examples just to keep in mind. So here are some questions for all of you to think about when you're wondering, is an app appropriate for my organization? How do you know if you need an app at all? The first question, obviously, at this point in the webinar is, what is the goal of the app? What are you trying to accomplish? It's never a good idea to just say, I want an app because other people have them and people are on their phones. That's not a strong enough argument. Our job at Milk Crate is to help you kind of craft a more compelling hypothesis around why you should go down this path. How are your current tools serving you? Can they serve the goal alone? For example, do you have a website that could be made mobilely responsive? Perhaps that would be enough. If not, what's the best path for building, paying for, and supporting an app? And then we're going to talk about some options for that in a minute. So this is just a really simple diagram to think about when you have, you've got your XY axis where we're looking at engagement and we're looking at behavior data. So if you're doing a great job getting engagement with your program participants at your nonprofit's programs, then great. That's one really important sign that you might not need an app. Another one is, do you have the behavior data and is it rich and easy to access? So is your program success really visible in a transparent and proven way? If you can say yes to both of those things, then it's possible you don't need to ever consider building an app. But if you're struggling in either of those, it's something that might be a solution. And we'll get into that more in a second. So can you execute on the app? Is this something that you think you could do internally? Well, the first question is, do you or your team have the expertise to design the right experience and tool? We have been working at this for years, and there are a lot of missteps that we've made. And so what we like to do is, if an organization wants to do it themselves, we will just tell them, here are some things to watch out for that we have learned could lead to a misstep. Do you have the money to hire experts in design and development? How are you going to pay for this? Do you need to get a grant? Do you need to get a corporate sponsor? That's something else that we advise people about, is how to think about the funding of this. And then finally, what is your timeline, or how quickly do you need to have this live? Is there some sort of launch date that's crucial in terms of an anniversary or a fundraising kickoff? To keep in mind, with custom development, with a web development shop, it could be anywhere from 6 to 18 months minimum. We typically, when we work with clients, it's something more like 1 to 4 months because we're that templated kind of niche solution. So just something to think about. Now, we've all seen slides like this where they say, good, fast, and cheap, pick 2. Now, there is an exception to this, and that's if your solution or your service is really focused on one specific problem for one specific type of client. And that's really what we're doing. And so that's why we are a very perfect fit for some, and we're not the right fit for others. And so it's really important to understand the different kinds of app solutions out there. So this diagram is just, again, a very simple way of thinking about the main options for mobile app development. In the top right, you've got an out-of-the-box templated solution that's much more affordable. And in the bottom left, you have something that costs a lot more and that can build exactly what you want to spec, whether or not that's what you should actually be doing. And so we're more in the top right-hand corner, although we do some add-on custom development as needed. but we keep that at a minimum because we're typically able to solve problems with the templates that we have for our clients. And again, this is all about money, focus, and time, and the three things that we're trying to help clients achieve in a way that's really focused on nonprofit programs and the problems that they're experiencing. And the way that we do that, again, is with these templated features. So most clients, when you talk to a nonprofit and they're thinking about building an app, the things that they're wanting are an events calendar, push notifications, potentially location check-in that's verified through GPS, polls and surveys, being able to segment their users into different groups and teams, and being able to share and track content. Other things that also come up are chat. So these are all features that we've already built, and that means that we don't have to build it from scratch each time. And so there's no reason for a nonprofit to pay custom development rates for these features because they've already been built. So this is the part where it's who shouldn't be doing this, because we have really strict criteria about who should and should not work with us. And so we want you guys to know when you're thinking about the options of should I pursue custom development or should I pursue a templated app solution. So you can kind of summarize these into 5 main categories. We're going to go through them now. So the very first one that is a non-starter for us is we only work with organizations that already have an existing audience. We will not work with a client that says, well, I don't currently have program participants, or I don't yet have members or students, but I want to build an app to get them. That is not the right way to be thinking about apps. And I know Whole Whale is going to go into this a bit more, but really creating an audience, that is something that happens at the top of your funnel. We are a solution for once you have that audience. It really should be about the intention to further engage and grow an existing audience. And we have some kind of secondary components to that. So that audience that you already have needs to have some familiarity with technology. They need to have already adopted using a smartphone or are eager to learn. You don't want to create extra friction for your participants if that's something that isn't familiar to them. Another one is these need to be participants that have opted into your program. It can't be something that they're not wanting to participate in or have signed up for one thing and you're trying to push them into another. Otherwise, they're just going to not download the app. They're not going to use it. They have to want to use it. And typically, it can be really, this is kind of a nice to have. If you're looking to segment your users, you're going to get a lot of extra value out of an app because you can provide so many unique experiences by putting them into different teams. So for example, segmenting users by location or by age or by their interests or by a cohort or something like that. You can have that unique experience for that group of users within your app and kind of make it much more tailored experience, and the data will also reflect that. So you can have different data sets for different users. This one is really crucial. That's why it's number 2. This is, there has to be someone within the organization whose job it is to make the program a success. So at the Cultural Alliance, that teen going to museum app, that champion was the person who runs that program because they were struggling with collecting the data around which kids were going to which museums. And so they're the ones that went to their executive director and said, I need an app for this. Or for the Committee of 70, the woman who is in charge of the We Vote program, who is the one managing all the different corporate partners whose employees were being enrolled to be more civically engaged and to vote. She's the one that went to her executive director and said, I'm struggling with communication and sharing content. I need an app for this. So whoever that, there has to be someone like that who benefits directly because they're going to be the point person that has to manage and support the program's success using this tool. A few others like the frequency. It's not good to build an app for a single use. A mobile website can typically suffice, but if it's about regular recurring use, like in an after-school program, a membership group, things like that, that's when it makes a lot more sense. Needing to share content. Again, we've talked about polls and surveys and events, volunteer opportunities. That's a really good way to get it into people's hands. And finally, that data. Needing an effective analog program that can be enhanced via an app where you can track that information. So this is kind of the virtuous cycle that we aim to support for nonprofits when they're building apps, is that they get money from foundations or donors to support their program. we build an app to enhance that program, and then that app generates the meaningful data that can get reported back to funders. I'm not going to go over this. This is basically a more detailed summary, but it'll get included in the deck so you can see a breakdown of this again. And this is just a sample process for how we work on projects with clients. We want to know who you are, what your mission is, and challenges you're facing. We want to know why you're building this app, and we actually go through a very in-depth discovery call to ask you a lot of questions around what you need. We then review our platform's capabilities and choose what features you will need. And then we create a timeline with due dates, and we do a lot of phased planning. Typically, our clients are working with us in 2, 3, and 5-year planning processes with reviews and improvements and changes along the way. And then we have a pricing matrix for nonprofits based on your budget, your needs, and your timing. And so the last thing that I'm going to do is just a fun little experience where I'm going to hop out of this window, and I'm going to actually take you to our website. And you can feel free to join me over there. It's just milkrate.tech. You can see it, milkrate.tech up in the browser. And you're just going to scroll down a little bit to this third section where it says, see what a Milkrate app can do. And I'll just refresh this so you can see exactly what it's going to look like for you. You're going to be asked to provide your email address, and that's just so we can follow up with you and see if you have any more questions about this tool. But this is actually a place where you can start designing an app. And what that means is once this little animation resolves, you can start actually clicking off goals that you have for your nonprofit program, and different features will appear. And you'll also see from some of our clients what they got out of that feature and how it helped them. You can also customize the look and color of the app. You can upload your logo. You can plug in some other things. And this will help you just start to get a feel for what it would be like if your organization were to have one. So we just want to make it really fun and easy for people to think about this so that they don't have to spend a lot of money mocking something up. You can just start playing with it now and start thinking about it and what the benefits would be. So with that, I am going to pass it back over to Anne.
All right, thanks, Morgan. As you can already hear, there's a lot of upsides to building an app and using it for repeat behavior and have that sense of rich data tracking over time. And on the other side of that, I want to also make sure we go over the case for websites, because with each organization, you will have a different situation that calls for different platforms. Now, as Morgan has mentioned earlier, apps is not a place for content discovery, as 0% of the content of apps, no matter how much time and energy you put into crafting that content, is indexable on search engines. So that is where websites come in, with building that top of the funnel awareness that leads questions that your supporters have to answers that your team can curate on your website. And the other side of this is that most of the time, when you look at your phone right now, if you pull it up, there are only a few apps that you're spending most of your time on. And for every 5 minutes that is spent on your phone, 1 is spent on Facebook. So this is a certain amount of time that Facebook has sort of cannibalizing to our lifestyle. And the other piece of this is that 57% of all web traffic is from mobile and tablet. And so there's a great opportunity here to capitalize on that traffic by building a mobile-first, mobile-friendly website. And while 87% of time spent on your phone is on apps, only around the majority of the time, again, plays into the Pareto's principle, where 72% of the time spent on app is spent on the top 50 apps. So this is a very competitive market to break into unless you can satisfy a very key need. And some of those needs and goals can be answered through the questions that Morgan had laid out earlier in her section. Another consideration for apps versus website is what budget you have to work with and what budget you have to continue to support these systems. So on the custom app site, Morgan, do you want to speak a bit to the cost here for building and maintaining custom versus templated app?
Absolutely. So what we found when looking at some of the research that these other groups did, they said that on average, a custom development app could be somewhere between 50 to 24,000. I've actually seen it be even more than that, but it is somewhere in that range where it's typically I would say at least 100,000 to build a really robust system that includes an administrative dashboard. And then you've got those ongoing costs. Anytime you want to make a change, or you want to improve things, there's going to be additional costs. And what we basically compare ourselves to this idea of building everything from scratch. Instead of doing that, we use templated features. Everyone needs the same events calendar. There's no reason to build that twice and incur the extra costs. So our launch costs are much, much lower, and our ongoing costs typically are also either lower or on par. And that's just to support the product, and any new features we develop are included for free. So you don't have to pay for those enhancements.
Yep, on the other side of that, I'm sure every organization already has a website, so you can tell from experience that a custom site versus a templated site has, again, different pricing range. But for a custom site where you're having a designer and development team build from scratch, it could range anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 on average for the launch itself. And as Morgan had mentioned, the upper limit is quite infinite. So there are sites that could cost up to 7 figures. But on average, this is the range that we see. And then on the self-serving templated site, when Wix and Squarespace of the world have come along, you can kickstart a site for around $100 and a lot of energy on your team. But it's very cost effective to launch a website these days when using templates. It could be anywhere from $100 to around $15,000 to launch a templated site on average. And the ongoing maintenance for these websites are also more cost effective when you think about the long term, because you're paying for hosting and regular plugin updates and some bug fixes, which do not add up to too much. And if there's a dev team in-house, even better, you can take that on for yourself. And there are a lot of technologies that Morgan had mentioned earlier that apps can offer that websites are still lagging behind. But there are certain new technologies that gets me very excited on implementing for nonprofits, including, and you've seen this, I'm sure, as you browse different sites, there are in-browser web push notifications to make up for the fact that we can't send triggers on websites in the same way that apps can send out to their users. And then there's also geolocation APIs that are now a lot more advanced and developed that you can deploy for your websites to take into consideration the location of a user, so you can serve them locations close by, and that is no longer just unique to apps. And then the other piece of conversational is that you can deploy chatbots, which come in many forms to your website. And one thing that I'm super excited about is, and has a low barrier to entry, is using Google Optimize to dynamically serve content to different segments and audiences on your site based on things like campaigns they came through, how they got to the site, where they are, and what time zone they're based in. So let me know if you have any questions around this, but I can go through a couple of examples just to show you what we mean by these new technologies that websites these days can benefit from. For instance, the first thing is web push notification, which I think is incredibly interesting. As you've been browsing around different sites, you can notice on the top left corner of the browser, sometimes there will be this alert that says XYZ website wants to show notifications in which you will be able to allow or block. So at the very least, there's still that level of privacy and opting in. And there are certain tools that you can employ for your website, like Push Alert or One Signal. And there are a handful of tools out there that can help you accomplish these push notifications to send out alerts to users. And the beautiful thing about this is that users don't have to be in your site to get notifications. And this is very similar to what you're seeing with Facebook notifications on your desktop or Gmail notification on your desktop. You can do the same thing with your website to say there's a new volunteer opportunity, or there's a gala or an event coming up nearby that supporters may be interested in joining. So here's a very quick mock-up of what the desktop push notification as well as mobile browser push notification could look like. So it's very much something that is familiar in users' UI. And the other thing that I get very excited about is geolocation APIs. As you've been browsing around, there's also that same dialog box next to the address bar that says this browser or this site would like to request a user location. And this is very helpful. For example, with USO, they can deploy this technology to help veterans see what locations are close by to them to get services. And you can also use geolocation to tailor content to users' locations for things like news or weather. And it also helps them navigate by showing the position of the users on the map, so you can let them know which route to take to get to the closest location. And there are a couple of technologies here. Of course, Google is always in the lead with geolocation API, and there's also Mozilla has their own API. HTML5 also has a geolocation API. And the thing that I was mentioned earlier is Google Optimized personalization. So this is Google Optimized a few years ago. If you've used anything like an Optimizely or VWO, you're very familiar with Google Optimize. It started as an A/B testing tool, and that is still their bread and butter. But with that, there are new features that Google launched called personalization, where you're able to serve different content to different people based on where they are, based on different criteria. So in this case, going back to our example with Donate Life America, we're able to show content uniquely to people who are browsing in New York, their data in New York State, so they can more relate to the need of where they're of their state, and therefore would be more likely to register to be a donor. And you can see here is a quick screenshot of the targeting. We can say if metro equals New York, and if the URL matches a certain page, then show this content. So this is a very incredibly powerful tool that we've been experimenting with. And one thing I want to emphasize is that this is not mutually exclusive. You can have both a website and an app. So you can have the best of both worlds. It is just a matter of understanding the order of priority. Do we need a website now? Do we need an app first? Do they need to live in tandem? And if so, what are some of the unique value propositions and unique features that each platform can offer that the other just can't satisfy? And the USO, one of our clients, is a great example of customizing different features and user experiences and user journeys on their website and their app. Now that was a whole lot. Now you've got a framework for understanding when a website works and when an app works. We also want to walk you through the planning process, because that is so crucial in helping you understand, get to your goal to then determine whether an app or a website or both is a good fit for your nonprofit. So we'll walk through the process of writing that RFP. The first step, of course, is planning the writing the RFP by making sure to meet with key stakeholders internally and externally to gather requirements that goes into this RFP. And here I will make sure to send out some resources that we have built in our site around templates that you can use for your next RFP. But here's a very quick outline of a sample RFP for a very small project. So regardless of what you're looking for, whether it be a website or an app, always make sure to state the purpose of the proposal, the background of your org, the features that you're looking for, timeline, budget, and proposal instructions. And these are very straightforward, but having a framework like this really makes sure that you cover all of your grounds and don't miss out on key details that may be overlooked in the initial scope. And after you've sent out the RFPs, there will be a number of vendors that responds with proposals. And this is when managing bids will become incredibly important. Make sure to find reputable vendors by calling up your friends in their trusted networks, and having pre-RFP conversations, or called RFI, requests for information, are also very, very helpful in getting back quality proposals. And having these conversations, oftentimes we find, can also help inform the nonprofit of some things that you may or may not be aware of, and to sort of help solidify the RFP a bit further. Evaluation. Now you've got all of these proposals back. It is very important to create a matrix and clear guideline for how you're going to rank these different proposals. Make sure this is going to be a lot of effort on your end, but planning up front will pay off dividends in the future. So you can go through all the proposals, filter out all the junks, and only share the cream of the crop proposals with your team to evaluate. And this is when afterwards, once you've come with a short list of vendors that truly understand your needs, then this is the moment where you'll be interviewing and scoring and deciding on a proposal, on a vendor to go with. And we oftentimes recommend that our clients and our nonprofits put in a budget range up front in your proposal to make sure that agencies and the vendors are clear on whether or not that would be something that is workable for them. And it keeps the bids in the right neighborhood, as we call it. We also have a free tool out there, ghostsnorkel.com, that walks you through every single step of generating an RFP. So please go feel free and give it a try. And also you can download our ebook on the simple guide to creating and navigating tech RFPs that our Chief Whaler George had written and published a while back. And with that said, I know we had covered a whole lot here. We want to make sure we have time to answer your questions as well. So please feel free to add it to the chat as we go through some of the questions that you've already added here. And thank you so much for staying with us. We're moving on to questions.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is Meredith. So I'll ask the questions from the chat. Keep sending them in. We have a first one from Emily here. What are some of the best sources or companies of website templates for nonprofits?
Yep, sources and companies of website templates for nonprofits. I would say in terms of templates, there are a lot of out-of-the-box templates that you can purchase for not much money, anywhere between $10 and $100 on things like Envato, which is a theme marketplace for common content management systems like WordPress and Drupal. And then from there, within those themes, there will be different controls where you can change the colors, customize the different layouts of your pages as a way of having not starting from a blank slate, but having already built out templates to work from. And I would encourage that you browse around those templates to make sure that they can accommodate some of the most common use cases for your organization, to make sure with a keen eye towards landing pages, because those are the most important, arguably the most important templates on your site, as it provides information, but also gets your supporters to take action. So we'll send out that link in Envato for you to browse around the sites. And then other CMS like Squarespace will have built-in templates for you to choose from. As you browse through, you can see how they look with existing templates. And those usually are free within the subscription that you have on Squarespace.
Great, thanks, Anne. I'll share that in the chat. In the meantime, this question is for Morgan. Can you clarify the difference between a web app and a native app and when to build each?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So a web app is something that's based on and uses technology that integrated with a browser. And whereas a native app is something that typically you're going to be downloading from an app store, although there are ways to kind of create a hybrid between the two. There are certain design and functionality things that get lost with a web app. Things like, and typically the interaction and the touch and feel of the app winds up being noticeably different, although that is improving as new technologies are developed. I don't want to get too technical, but basically the languages that are used and the frameworks that are used will wind up will make something either a native app or a web app, and will then have consequences around things like push notifications, the touch and feel of the app, and how it gets downloaded, whether it's from a browser or from the Android, from like a Google Play Store or the Apple Store. So those are kind of the main things. Often people will explore web apps as a more affordable solution, but it's increasingly becoming possible to get something that's a native app, like what Milkrate builds, their native apps. But because it's templated, you're able to still get a lot of that same savings.
Great. I have another question for you, Morgan. What is the range of an app from that an app from Milkrate might cost?
Sure, and we do include that in the slides, so you'll have that as well, but we have a pricing matrix, and basically when we do a discovery call with a potential customer, we ask them questions that helps us figure out where they fall on that. It's kind of like a sliding scale based on the resources and needs of the prospective client. And so the absolute maximum amount that it could cost to launch an app is typically $25,000, assuming there's no custom development. And the minimum is something like $1,500. So it could be as low as $1,500 or as high as $25,000, depending on where you fall in that range. And then there's the monthly costs that are somewhere between typically like $200 to $800 a month.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Haven't seen any in the chat. I'll give people a few minutes just to If you have any questions in the last 10 minutes of this presentation. In the meantime, anything that you want to shout out Morgan and Anne while we wait for that? And then if we don't have any questions, we'll just end a little bit early for everyone.
Well, I actually have a question for Morgan. So with web development for websites, we make websites responsive for all devices, whether it be Android or iOS. And I'm curious for you, Morgan, how do you approach with different nonprofits, of course, whether to develop for iOS first and then Android, or the other way around, or at the same time?
Well, actually, what we do is we deploy for both at the same time. That's one of the benefits of the framework that we use when we develop our technology. It allows us to launch an app for Android and iOS at the exact same time with no extra cost or effort. So that's one of the things that's been really wonderful about tech development in the last couple years, and part of why we're kind of a part of this 2.0 wave of apps for nonprofits, because the first wave, they weren't targeting real problems enough. They were just kind of a trend or a fad, but it was also super expensive, and you had to pick typically because budgets often wouldn't allow for both. And now you can have both. There is data just around like which one you should be going for based on demographics. Android is both more well adopted in very techie developed communities, but it's also it's more used in low income communities. So if you're kind of if you're like running a STEM program and for some reason you can only deploy an app you have to pick, then Android would make sense. Or if you're serving a very low income population, Android would make sense. But again, a lot of companies, including Milk Crate, that provide templated apps allow you to not have to pick.
That sounds wonderful. So this is our last call for questions. Any final burning questions before we wrap up? All right, hearing none. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. The work you do is incredibly important, and we hope that we've been able to provide you with some helpful information on which direction to go. And if you have any more remaining questions, please feel free to reach out to Morgan or myself. And Meredith, after this, will be sending around an email with the resources we mentioned, as well as a recording of the webinar today.
Yep, that pretty much covers it. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Morgan, so much for joining us. Thank you all to all the attendees. You get an extra 8 minutes of your day, so enjoy.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.